We are going to the NFC North today, starting in Green Bay. The reports out of Green Bay are that Rory Robinson, and this is Rory Robinson of the Mirror and USA Today, is reporting that the Green Bay Packers are planning to get rid of cornerback Jair Alexander. Alexander was the Packers' first-round pick in 2018 and has been one of Green Bay's best players since then. However, after back-to-back injury-plagued seasons, the Packers are reportedly looking to cut their losses and move on from Alexander. In related news, Zach Cruz from Packers Wire has pegged Asante Samuel, also cornerback, as a potential replacement. He says Zach Cruz of Packers Wire laid out some of the pros of Green Bay signing Asante Samuel Jr. and mentions the fact that Samuel is, quote, only 25 years old, who has starting experience and production history. He's a 47-game starter at cornerback and has 6 interceptions, 37 pass breakups with at least 10 every year between 2021 and 2023. Asante Samuel also has a working history with Packers passing game coordinator Derek Ansley when they worked together in Los Angeles with the Chargers. Ansley was his position coach in 2021 and in 2022, and he was the Chargers defensive coordinator in 2023. Familiarity is so important in determining fits for players. And in draft news out of Green Bay, Brennan Rupp, also of Packers Wire, has targeted Jamari Caldwell as a potential target for Green Bay. He posted an article. He suggests that Oregon defensive tackle Caldwell could be a player that the Packers target in the 2025 NFL draft. He states, if the Packers want to continue their upward trajectory against the run next season, a player they could target is Jamari Caldwell. Caldwell started his college career at the JUCO level before transferring to Houston in 2022. During his 2 seasons in Houston, Caldwell recorded 13 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks, and he then transferred to Oregon for the 2024 season. At 6'2", 342 pounds, Caldwell is a space eater. He has the mass and powerful base to clog up running lanes. Simply put, he's a roadblock. Let's get Will's thoughts on news out of Green Bay.
Well, I guess I will say this. On Jamari Caldwell, it's an interesting name. He is not highly rated. So did they say where they're looking at picking him up, where in the draft?
I should have listed that. I think it was 67.
So they're giving him a late second round draft grade right now.
Yep.
His prospect ranking, I want to say that he's probably towards the bottom. But he is a road grader. The guy is massive. He's 6'1", 340 pounds. But he has short arms, 32 and a quarter. He's got 9.5-inch hands, which are not terrible. 40 was 5'10". Wingspan is really short, so he's not, in my opinion, he's not a very good prospect. But that doesn't mean that he can't turn out to be a good football player. So what we're going to see, as we get through the draft and as we get through the combine, that some of these lesser known commodities coming out of college are going to turn into elite options in the NFL. And even when they don't have a good first or second season, well, maybe it's that third season they needed. So this could be a guy that turns into a gem. I would not have him at the end of the second round right now. Matter of fact, I know I don't. But he's an interesting prospect. He reminds me a little bit of Siaka Ika. Kind of similar size, status. But go ahead, take him, I guess is what I would say. Because I don't think that's going to... I don't think it's going to stop us from running the football, at least right now. As far as pros and cons of signing cornerback Asante Samuel, I'm neither pro nor against this. Obviously, I don't have a mule in the race for the Packers, right? But as far as his previous history, starting experience, 47 games, 6 career interceptions, 37 pass breakups. He's had 10, in each of the last 3 seasons, I believe. So, yeah, he's a good player still, but, man, he would be a good depth signing for the Lions if we really needed some depth, to be honest with you. As far as Packers set to cut 2-time Pro Bowler Jair Alexander, I've never had him as a fit to the Lions. I don't think that he will be, on the radar for Brad Holmes at all. If we were to simulate this to the Lions, I really don't have much to say on Jair other than I guess I'm not surprised.
Beautiful. Let's head down to Chicago. Alyssa Barbieri from Bears Wire is reporting that the Bears are not expected to use their franchise tag this year. She says, the reason why, there's not an obvious candidate. The Bears' 2 biggest free agents are wide receiver Keenan Allen and guard Tevin Jenkins, but Chicago isn't expected to use the tag on either. Allen was a reliable target for Caleb Williams, but he's likely looking to get paid more than what would likely be a one-year team-friendly deal. The team also expects Rome Odunze to step into a bigger role in year 2, and Tevin Jenkins appears on his way out of Chicago as the Bears are hesitant to commit a substantial amount of money to him due to his playing in just 45 games over the last 4 seasons. Matt Bowen of ESPN on the free agency front has dubbed the Bears as a best fit for two different free agents. He's got, of the top 50 free agents, which included Kansas City guard Trey Smith and Atlanta Falcons center Drew Dahlman, he's got them both linked to the Bears. Bowen points to Trey Smith's connection to the Bears GM Ryan Poles, who was in Kansas City when Smith was drafted. And in Dahlman, the draw for Chicago would be that he has proven to be a stable and productive player, something Chicago would love for new head coach Ben Johnson and quarterback Caleb Williams. And then going back to Alyssa Barbieri on the Chicago Bears draft front, Bears shore up offensive line at number 10 overall. It's no secret that the Bears had one of the worst offensive lines in 2024, she writes. And despite that, Caleb Williams still had 20 touchdowns and only 6 interceptions on the season. With new head coach Ben Johnson having made it crystal clear that his offense will be built around Caleb Williams, it stands to reason that the Bears will likely look to protect Caleb. Jordan Plosher of Pro Football Focus has the Bears selecting Texas offensive tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. with the 10th overall pick in April. Will, your thoughts in Chicago?
Oh, man. Honestly, Chicago's a dumpster fire, and I don't think it's going to get any better this year. I don't care how many fire extinguishers they use. I just don't think that the fire is going to get put out just yet. They're going to be in a slight rebuild, and I hate to use the term rebuild. Maybe it's retooling is a little bit better of a term to use. As far as Jenkins on his way out, I'm not surprised. They definitely need some interior help on that offensive line. Keenan Allen, like I've always said, you cannot buy a football team. You can't overspend on free agents and then expect to keep them. I'm not surprised if he's exited this year at all. As far as 2 free agent fits for offensive linemen, yeah, I mean, they need help. So they're going to be looking wherever they can. And I do agree with your last point here. Shoring up the offensive line is probably the most important move the Bears can make this season. And finding somebody in the draft. Now I'm having trouble even remembering who I even mocked to them this year in my first 1.0, which, by the way, 2.0 will be out soon. Let me see if I can take a quick look, but I'll come back to that after you go through the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's head down to Minnesota. Now, Dan Graziano from ESPN is reporting that the Vikings are pushing back their void date for Byron Murphy Jr., their defensive back. Per league source, the Vikings and cornerback Byron Murphy Jr. have agreed to push back the void date on his contract. Originally, the deal voided 23 days prior to the start of the league year. Now, it is the day before the start of the league year. What this means is that Murphy cannot be franchised since the date is past the deadline for teams to use the franchise tag. And then on the draft front for the Vikings, Daniel Jeremiah from NFL.com has noted simply that the Vikings have seen the difference a dynamic player at the running back position can do and can make, and references Jahmyr Gibbs out of Detroit as an example. So will Minnesota look to add a dynamic playmaker in round 1 to put behind likely starter at quarterback J.J. McCarthy? He has Travion Henderson, running back, going to Minnesota at number 24.
So on the Vikings, talking about Vikings pushing back the void date on cornerback Byron Murphy, that tells me they're trying to get a deal done. They want to keep him in-house. I think that's a good move. We'll see if they're going to be able to afford him and do the things that they want to do in free agency. Minnesota Vikings putting a running back to Minnesota in round 1 is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But you know what? I respect Daniel Jeremiah, but this is just not going to happen. There's no way that Ashton Genty or any of the other running backs in this draft, which I believe that there's probably only 2 that could probably potentially go in the first round, but Genty is definitely one of them. I just think that would be a bad move. They need to protect. They need to protect JJ if he's going to be their starter this year, and an offensive line makes way more sense for the Vikings, especially with where they're picking. In my mock, I had. By the way, I had defensive. I believe I had defensive line for the Chicago Bears. I had Banks gone way before that. But as far as Minnesota goes, I had them taking a tight end. So it does kind of help them, with blocking, as the extra, tight end in the game and, in 22 or 12 personnel. It's not necessarily an offensive lineman, but at picking at 24, they will have the pick of the litter They could reach for a guard, but I think that it is going to be a little bit early. Maybe a tackle convert at pick 24 makes sense. I could see that happening, but not a running back. What's up next?
We head to the Detroit Lions, our beloved Detroit Lions. Now, Russell Brown from Lions Wire threw out a suggestion that Josh Sweat could be a fit in Detroit. He says having defensive end Josh Sweat on this list is probably the least realistic option for the Lions. He's got a whole list of players, but he does point out that much of that is due to the price tag going through the roof after the Super Bowl. Throughout the playoffs this season, Sweat generated 10 total sacks, 3 tackles for loss, and 2.5 sacks. During his 7 years in Philadelphia, Sweat has made 54 tackles for loss and 43 sacks. Over the last 3 seasons, he's generated 31 tackles for loss and 25.5 sacks. Really starting to come into his own, Sweat plays with very good burst and is able to turn speed to power. If he were to sign with Detroit, he'd pair very nicely with Aiden Hutchinson. Darius Smith and Josh Pascal, the Lions giving themselves another weapon on the defensive line would be wise and should be a priority this offseason. Sweat's projected market value from Spotrac is 3 years for $56.5 million, which equates to $18.8 million per season. And then in our draft news, we've talked a lot about the Myles Garrett front, trades, draft, all of how they would all work together. But Jeff Risdon from Lions Wire laid out what a Myles Garrett trade would look like. And here's what he has. And again, he's specific to say this is a hypothetical. It's not a projection of what the Lions will do. It's not a prediction of what they will do. The Lions would send the following to the Browns: a 2025 first round pick, which would be number 28 overall, 2025 third round pick, which is number 101, a 2026 first, a 2026 third, and Broderick Martin. And in exchange, the Browns would send back Myles Garrett, a 2025 fifth round pick, which would be number 165, and a 2026 second round pick. The fifth round pick the Browns are sending is Detroit's own selection, which was traded in the fall for edge Darius Smith. So that's kind of rapid fire, but your thoughts there on maybe Josh Sweat in Detroit, and again, revisit of another hypothetical Myles Garrett trade.
So let me start with Myles Garrett. This is kind of hilarious. Number one, 2 firsts and 2 thirds. I think that is probably the barrier for entry into the Myles Garrett lottery. However, they turned down 2 first-round picks last season, and now heading into a final contract year, I believe Myles Garrett, does he have 1 or 2 years left now? I don't remember. But the fact that Risdon thinks it's 2 firsts and 2 thirds, and that we get a second and a fifth back, yeah, that doesn't work. There's no way that the Browns are going to trade Garrett for that kind of draft capital. We're not going to get anything back in a trade. But putting Broderick Martin on the trade block, I mean, what is that? I think it's hilarious, because that's saying that Broderick is worth something. So somebody thinks that Broderick is actually worth something in a trade. And I'm being facetious here, right? So if Risdon is saying that Broderick Martin is worth something, then I think that we have the answer that Broderick is not a wasted pick. However, that is the same line of Hendon Hooker. They're just not worth anything when they haven't played, right? These guys have got to progress in the NFL to be worth anything. And Brad gave up 2 fourths and a fifth for Broderick Martin. I highlighted everything in a video yesterday about Broderick Martin with all the facts, and it's hilarious that I still get feedback that people just don't get it. It's like they didn't listen or pay attention to anything that I said in the video at all. So maybe they need to rewatch it, because Broderick Martin, he has yet to be who we think he's going to be, but less than 15% of all picks or all players in the NFL are third-round picks that play. So when you think about taking a guy at the back end of the third round and you give up a couple of fifths that were really meaningless because there was no other defensive end or defensive tackle unless you had the forethought of Kobe Turner being that dog that he is, that's the only one that you would have taken. But nobody would have known that. I mean, I did. I mocked Kobe to the Lions. I loved his tape. I'm surprised that Brad missed on him, but I don't think that there was another situation that was better. However, go watch the video. I think you'll learn a lot. Myles Garrett will not be a Detroit Lion in 2025, and if he does become a Lion in 2025, then that means that Brad has decided to crumble to pressure and he's going all in. As far as Josh Sweat, yeah, this isn't happening either. So Josh Sweat obviously is going to want a max contract. Listen to Aiden Hutchinson. He himself said it doesn't work. You can't have 2 of the highest paid players on one team at one position. It just doesn't work. You will be in a bad situation all over again. However, I think that we'll know more when we get to OTAs. where is Hutchinson's progression going to be? We saw him running the other day in Allen Park. Still has a limp, right? Doesn't look like he's totally healed. Doesn't look like he's extremely strong yet in the bottom half. It's just going to take time. So when we know more about Aiden, I think that that's when we'll have some definitive ideas as to what's going to happen in free agency. Unfortunately, we can't get through free agency or the draft and know what's going to be going on with Aiden. So maybe Brad Holmes is going to pad the position. That might be a smart move for him, is to pad the position. So for that reason, yeah, I could see another defensive end, defensive tackle coming in through free agency, but I don't think it's going to be a $25, $30 million guy. Outside of that, yeah, I mean, I guess that's it. That was just the two topics for the Lions. So good work on Riley Road Report. Final thoughts for you.
Yep. No, I think you're right. Man, it's hard to follow up with Will, because I think you hit all the points. So I think it's going to continue to be the best division in the NFL, and we'll find out here soon what the rosters will look like. But hopefully the Lions have a great offseason and we can three-peat in that NFC North.